There is a specific kind of woman at every office who nobody quite sees. She is not invisible. She is not unattractive. She is not unfriendly. She is just quiet. She keeps her head down. She does her work. She eats her lunch at her desk instead of at the round table with everybody else. When somebody makes a joke in the meeting, she smiles a small, polite smile and then looks back at her laptop. And after 2 years of working 10 feet away from her, you realize you know her Starbucks order, but you don't know her middle name. You know she has a small silver bracelet she wears every day, but you don't know who gave it to her. You know she is the person who quietly reorders the office coffee before anyone else notices we're low, but you don't know where she goes when she leaves the parking lot at 5:30. Her name was Lila Ashford, 2 years, 10 feet away, and the most I knew about her was that she took her coffee with 1 sugar and no milk. Until one Thursday night in April, when everybody's car was in the shop except mine, and I drove her home in the rain because it was the decent thing to do. Her roommate opened the door. Her roommate took one look at me standing there dripping wet with Lila's laptop bag in my hand, and her whole face changed. Her roommate said, very quietly, "Oh, so you're the one she cries about." I did not know what to do with that sentence. I still don't, in some ways. But I want to tell you what happened next, because it was the most important night of my adult life, and I did not know it while it was happening. My name is Ethan Callaway. I'm 35 years old and I have worked at Merrick Data Solutions in Charlotte, North Carolina for 6 years. Merrick is a mid-sized data analytics company. We do risk modeling for insurance carriers. Nobody outside our industry has ever heard of us. Inside our industry, we are the 3rd largest firm on the East Coast. I run a small team of 8 analysts. My job is to keep smart people happy while they do difficult math for boring clients. Most days it works. I got here the normal way. Small state school, economics degree, junior analyst job after graduation, 6 promotions in 12 years. I have not had a bad performance review since 2019. I make enough money to own a small brick house in a neighborhood called Elizabeth, drive a Ford F-150 with 90,000 miles on it, and put aside a little every month for a retirement that feels theoretical. I've been divorced 3 years. Her name was Kelsey. We were married 5 years. We divorced because we grew up. That's the honest version. We got together at 26. By 32, we had become 2 different people who were still trying to be the versions of ourselves we had promised to be at our wedding. It ended the way most quiet divorces end. She kept the couch. I kept the F-150. We signed papers. We waved at each other for a year at the same coffee shop before she moved to Raleigh, and I stopped seeing her at all. Since Kelsey, I have not dated seriously. Not because I am against it, because I do not know how anymore. I go to work. I come home. I take my dog Rufus for a long walk. I eat something. I read for an hour. I go to bed. On Saturday mornings, I go to the farmer's market. On Sunday mornings, I go to a diner called Harold's for the same breakfast I have been ordering since 2015. That is my life. That is a fine life. Most days I believe it. Lila Ashford started at Merrick Data 26 months before the Thursday night I am telling you about. I remember her first day because I was the one who walked her around the floor for introductions. She was 29 at the time, small, dark hair pulled back, wire-frame glasses, a gray cardigan over a white blouse. She shook my hand with the kind of firm handshake somebody's father teaches them before their first job interview, and she said, "Nice to meet you, Mr. Callaway." I said, "Ethan, just Ethan." She said, "Nice to meet you, Ethan, just Ethan." That was the first joke she ever made in my presence. It was so quiet I almost missed it. She said it looking down at her new hire folder, and by the time I registered that it was a joke and started to laugh, she had already moved on to the next question about the office kitchen. I remember thinking, this one is going to be fine. She is smart, and she is going to keep her head down, and she is going to be fine. For 26 months, That is exactly what she did. Lila sat in the cubicle diagonally across from mine, 10 feet away. I could see the back of her head from my office door. She was the third best analyst on my team, which is to say she was excellent. The two ahead of her had been at the company for a decade. She worked late without complaining. She caught errors in the modeling that senior people had missed. She trained the interns every summer with the patience of a middle school teacher. Her Christmas gift to the office every year was a small tin of homemade shortbread with rosemary in it that made everybody quietly disappear for a week trying to figure out who had made it. That was Lila. She did not go to the after-work drinks. She did not come to the team softball. She did not join the office fantasy football league that half the company played. She was, as best I could tell, a woman who had decided at some point that she was here to do her job and go home, and everything else about being at Merrick was optional, and she was going to opt out. I respected that. I did not push. I had been in her seat once. I understood. Twice a year. Once around her birthday, once around Christmas. I would ask her to grab lunch as her manager, just to check in. She always said yes. She always let me pick the place. She always ordered whatever I ordered. And she always spent the whole lunch asking me questions about my life, instead of talking about hers. I would try to redirect. She would deflect. We would go back to the office, and I would realize an hour later that I had learned nothing new about her. Again. I told my sister once, my sister Nora, who lives in Asheville, that I had a coworker who was the most private person I had ever worked with. Nora asked me what she looked like. I said, I don't know, small, dark hair, glasses. Nora asked me if she was pretty. I said, I have never thought about it. Nora looked at me across her kitchen counter and said, Ethan, that answer is a lie. I said, Nora, she works for me. It's not, I don't think about her that way. Nora said, okay. She said it in a tone that made me change the subject. That was 2 years ago. I did not think about the conversation again until the Thursday night in April that everything changed. The Thursday I want to tell you about was late April. There had been rain in the forecast all week, but that Thursday it got serious. The whole Southeast was under a flash flood watch by 3 o'clock. By 5 o'clock, the streets around our building were starting to pool. At 5:25, I walked past Lila's cubicle on my way to the parking garage. She was still at her desk, laptop open, small silver bracelet catching the fluorescent light. She was frowning at her screen. Lila, you heading out? She looked up. Her glasses had slipped a little down her nose. I called an Uber 20 minutes ago. Nobody's accepting. I think the whole city stopped moving. Where's your car? In the shop, alternator, since Tuesday. I looked at the window. The rain was coming sideways. Where do you live? Elizabeth, off 7th Street. I stared at her. Lila, I live in Elizabeth. I know. You know? She looked down at her laptop for a second, then back up at me. Something in her face I couldn't read. I saw your truck at Harold's Diner on a Sunday morning last year. You were sitting alone at the counter reading a newspaper. I didn't say hi because you looked like you didn't want to be interrupted. I stared at her. 26 months I had worked 10 feet from this woman, and she had never mentioned that. Lila, I go to Harold's every Sunday. I know. You know? She smiled a very small smile. Not embarrassed exactly. Just private. You've been going for a while, Ethan. I did not know what to do with that. I said, grab your stuff. I'll drive you home. She hesitated for maybe 2 seconds. Long enough that I understood she was thinking about something specific. Then she said, okay, thank you. I helped her carry her laptop bag out to my truck. The rain was so loud in the parking garage that we couldn't really talk. When we got to the truck, she stood by the passenger door for a second, like she wasn't sure what to do. I opened the door for her. She got in. Wet hair. Wet cardigan. Small silver bracelet catching the light of my dome light. I got in the driver's side, started the engine, turned the heat on, backed out slowly. Getting out of the parking garage took 10 minutes. The streets were pooling badly. Cars were pulled over on the side of 4th Street with hazards on. I drove at 15 miles an hour in low visibility with my wipers on maximum. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then, at a red light, Lila said quietly, "Ethan, can I ask you a strange question?" "Yes?" "Do you like your life?" I looked at her. The rain was drumming on the roof. The wipers were going. Her face was in profile, backlit by the streetlights through the rain, and I realized suddenly that Nora had been right 2 years ago. I had never let myself see her. I said, "Lila, that is a strange question." She said, "I know. Why are you asking?" "Because I've watched you at work for 26 months, and you seem like a man who is doing everything right. You show up early. You are kind to your team. You never lose your temper. You make everybody around you feel calm. And I have been trying to figure out for 2 years whether you are actually happy or whether you are just so used to holding it together that you can't tell anymore." The light turned green. I did not move. The car behind me honked. I drove forward. I said, "Lila, nobody has asked me that question in 3 years." She said, "I know." "You know?" She looked out the window, then back at me. "Ethan, I want to tell you something. And after I tell you it, I want you to know that I am completely fine if you say nothing back and we just drive to my apartment and we never mention it again. I know I'm your employee. I know there are rules. I would never do anything that put your job at risk or mine. But I have to say this once, because it has been sitting in me for 2 years. And I am not the kind of person who gets to say things, and I think I have to say it once." My chest tightened. I said, "Okay." She took a breath. She looked at her hands. She looked back up. She said, "I have watched you for 2 years, Ethan. I have watched the way you talk to your team. I have watched the way you handled the layoff conversations in 2023 when you had to let Michael go, and I saw you take a personal day the next day, and I knew it was because you had cried in your truck. I have watched you at Harold's on Sunday mornings. I have watched you at the farmer's market on Saturdays. I have watched you at the CVS on 10th Street picking up dog food, and I have not said a single thing in 26 months because I am a private person and I don't know how to talk to men, and I did not want to be the woman who ruined a good job by saying something to her married-looking boss." She stopped, took a breath. "But you are not married. You have never been married since I've known you. And you are, Ethan, you are the first person I have watched at close range in a long time who I actually wanted to know. And I have been trying to figure out for 2 years whether the right thing to do is quit my job and then say something, or say something and then quit my job, or say nothing at all. And tonight, when you asked me if I needed a ride home, I decided the universe was telling me to say something." She looked at me. Rain on the windshield, wipers going. She said, "That's the something. That's all. You don't have to say anything back." I did not say anything back. I drove for the next 3 blocks in silence. I did not know what to say. I pulled up in front of her building on 7th Street. Small brick fourplex, yellow porch light, rain still coming down. I put the truck in park. I turned to her. I said, "Lila, can I walk you to your door?" She looked at me. She said, "Yes." I got out of the truck, went around, opened her door. She got out with her laptop bag over her shoulder and her wet cardigan wrapped tight around her. I walked her up the concrete steps to the porch. She fumbled her keys out of her purse. She said, "Ethan, thank you for the ride. Truly. And I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said any of that. I made things weird. I'm sorry." I said, "Lila." She looked up at me. I said, "You did not make things weird." We stood on the porch for a moment, rain coming down behind me, yellow porch light above us. She was small enough that I had to look down at her. Water was in her hair. She said, "I'm going to open the door now, and I'm going to go inside, and I'm going to have a very quiet Thursday night alone in my kitchen, and try to pretend the last 10 minutes did not happen, and you are going to drive home, and on Monday morning, we are going to be normal at work. Okay? I said, okay. But then, I did not step back. Because I could not step back. She said, Ethan. Yeah. Are you going to leave? Not yet. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, then come inside, just for a minute, so I can dry off your laptop bag before you get in the truck. That's all. Just inside. Just a minute. I nodded. She unlocked the door, pushed it open, and her roommate was standing in the entryway of the apartment holding a mug of tea, wearing pajamas and a bathrobe, staring at the two of us as we came through the door. The roommate was maybe 28, tall, blonde, sharp face. The kind of woman you can tell was somebody's protective older sister even before you know the family dynamics. She looked at Lila. She looked at me. She looked at my laptop bag in my hand. She looked at Lila again. And her whole face, I can't describe it exactly, something moved across it. Recognition, then softening, then something almost like relief. She set her mug of tea down on the entryway table. She looked at me. She said, very quietly, "Oh, so you're the one she cries about." The apartment went silent. Lila made a sound in her throat that I don't have a word for. Lila said, "Ren, please, please don't." The roommate, Ren apparently, put her hands up, palms out. "Lila, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. You brought him here. You said his name to me for 2 years, and you brought him here. Lila had covered her face with both hands. She said, "Ren, please, just go to your room. I'm begging you, please just go." Ren picked up her mug of tea. She looked at me for one long moment. She said quietly, "I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry." She walked down the hallway, closed her bedroom door. The apartment was quiet, except for the rain outside. Lila stood in her entryway with her hands over her face. I stood there with her laptop bag in my hand. Neither of us moved for a long time. Finally, Lila lowered her hands. Her face was very red. Her glasses were fogged. She said, "Ethan, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. Please, please just go. Please leave. Please give me your bag or whatever you want, and please just leave. And please forget this whole night happened, and I will resign in the morning." I said, "Lila." She said, "Please, Ethan." I said, "Lila, look at me." I said, "I am not going to leave, because if I leave right now, you are going to spend the whole weekend inside this apartment believing you have ruined your career and your life. And I am not going to be the man who lets that happen. I am going to stand in your entryway for a few minutes while you calm down, and then we are going to sit at your kitchen table and we are going to talk about what your roommate just said. And nobody is quitting anybody's job, okay?" She started to cry, silently, just tears down her face. She whispered, "Ethan, she's been telling me for 2 years. I need to just say something to you." I said, "I gathered that." She wiped her cheeks. Tried to laugh, failed. She said, "You must think I don't know what you think." I said, "Lila, I am going to tell you exactly what I think, in about 2 minutes. But first you are going to sit down and I am going to make you tea, because you are shivering. Okay?" She nodded. She walked into her small living room, sat on the couch, wrapped a blanket around herself. I put my laptop bag down, went into her kitchen, boiled water, found her tea, made 2 cups, brought them to the living room. I sat down on the couch next to her, not too close, but close enough. She held the tea in both hands. I looked at her. I said, "Lila, I want to tell you what I think." She said, "Okay." I set my tea down on the coffee table. I said, "Lila, I have to tell you something." "Yes." "I said something to my sister 2 years ago about you. I told her there was a coworker I couldn't figure out, that she was private and quiet, and I could not get her to talk about herself. My sister asked me what you looked like. I told her I hadn't really thought about it. My sister told me that was a lie. Lila did not say anything. I said, "It was a lie. I had been lying to myself for 2 years about you, Lila. Because you were my direct report. Because there are rules. Because I have not been in a serious relationship in 3 years, and I have been telling myself that meant I was done with that stuff. But I was lying about the whole thing. I have noticed you every single day for 26 months. I noticed the silver bracelet the first week. I noticed you at Harold's Diner 2 Sundays ago. You were there, at a booth in the back, and you looked up when I walked in, and I looked away too fast, and I thought about it for the next 3 days trying to figure out why I looked away." Lila set her tea down. Her hands were shaking again. She said, "Ethan, I know. You saw me at Harold's. I saw you at Harold's. I saw you see me. I know you did. I have been going to Harold's on the Sundays. I know you go for about a year and a half." I stared at her. "For a year and a half?" "Yes. You have been eating at my Sunday diner for a year and a half." "Yes. Just to see me at a distance." "Yes." I laughed, once, then covered my face with my hand, then laughed again, then looked at her. I said, "Lila, that is the most terrifying and beautiful thing anybody has ever told me." She laughed, once, choked, cried a little. She said, I know. Ren says the same thing. She says I am a very strange woman with very strange love strategies. She says I should have just talked to you." "Why didn't you?" She looked at me for a long moment. She said, "Because I was scared, Ethan. Because the last man I loved lied to me for 2 years, and I did not see it coming. Because I moved to Charlotte alone at 28, and I did not know a single person, and I decided at some point that the only way I was going to make it through the rest of my life without being hurt again was to just be quiet and do my job and love people from a distance and never tell them. And that had been working. That had been working for 2 years. Right up until tonight when it stopped working. I sat with that. Then I said, Lila, yes, that is not a good plan for a whole life. She said, I know that. You know that. I know that. She looked at her hands. But I did not know how to change it, Ethan. I don't know how to be a person who says what she feels. I don't know how to be a woman who walks up to a man at a diner and says, Hi, I've been thinking about you. That is not who I am. That is not who I have ever been. I am a person who quietly loves people from 10 feet away and cries about them at night with my roommate, and I have been that person my whole life, and I have made peace with it, I think. I said, Lila, look at me. She looked at me. I said, Lila, you did not fail tonight. Your roommate did not fail. The universe did not fail. Tonight was your first attempt at doing the thing you have not been doing your whole life, and you did it. You said the thing. In the truck. Before your roommate said anything, you said it. Do you remember? She thought back. Her face changed. She said, I did say it. You did. I said it in the truck. You said it in the truck. Before Ren said anything at all. Before Ren said anything at all. She stared at me. She said, Ethan, I was going to try. Tonight. I made myself a promise this morning. I said if you offered me a ride home, I was going to try. That was my one attempt. I was going to try once. I looked at her. Lila, I want you to know something. Yes, I said. I would have said yes to that ride offer even if the whole city hadn't flooded. I would have said yes on a sunny day. I would have said yes on any day of the last 26 months. And I want you to know that on Sunday morning, this Sunday, 2 days from now, I want you to come with me to Harold's, not from 10 feet away in a booth in the back, at the counter, next to me, with coffee, like a person who has decided to stop watching from a distance. She started to cry again. but it was different crying this time. She said, "Ethan." "Yes, Sunday, Harold's." I said, "Sunday, Harold's." I did not touch her that night. I sat with her on that couch until she stopped shivering. I finished my tea. I stood up. I picked up my laptop bag. I walked to her door. She followed me. At the door, I said, "Lila, tell Ren I'm not mad." She laughed. She said she will be so relieved. I said, "And tell her thank you." Lila looked at me. She said, "For what?" I said, "For saying the thing you could not say." She nodded. She wiped her eyes. She said, "Sunday." I said, "Sunday." I walked back out into the rain, got in my truck, drove home. I did not sleep well Thursday night. I did not sleep well Friday night. I did not sleep well Saturday night. I did not text her. She did not text me. That was somehow understood between us, that we were going to let Sunday be its own thing, without a bunch of anxious back-and-forth messages first. Sunday morning I got up at 7, took Rufus for a longer walk than usual, came home, showered, put on jeans and a flannel and my good boots, the ones I don't usually wear to Harold's, drove downtown. Harold's is a diner on Central Avenue that has been serving eggs to Charlotte since 1979. Harold is dead. His grandson Marcus runs it now. Marcus has been pouring me black coffee every Sunday for a decade. I got there at 8:15, 15 minutes earlier than my usual 8:30, sat at the counter, ordered coffee, watched the door. Lila walked in at 8:28. She was wearing a soft green sweater and jeans. Her hair was down for the first time I had ever seen. No glasses, contacts, I realized. She looked, I don't know how to say it, she looked like a woman I might have seen at a farmer's market and thought about all afternoon. She saw me. She walked to the counter. She sat down on the stool next to mine. Marcus came over. Marcus is 50. Marcus has never in a decade of Sunday mornings seen me sit with another person at his counter. Marcus took one look at Lila. Marcus took one look at me. Marcus did not say a single word about it. Marcus said, "Coffee?" Lila said, "Yes, please. 1 sugar, no milk." Marcus said, "Same as your friend." He walked away without waiting for a reaction. Lila laughed. Small, nervous, real. She said, "Ethan." I said, "Lila." She said, "I have imagined sitting at this counter with you probably 400 times. I said I have imagined it maybe twice, but very carefully." She laughed. We stayed at Harold's for 3 hours. She told me about her life, about growing up in Winston-Salem, about her mother who died when Lila was 21, about the man who lied to her for 2 years, a fiancé it turned out, who had been running a whole second relationship in Raleigh for the entire engagement, and about the way that ending had made her quiet in a way she had not been before. I told her about my life, about Kelsey, about the F-150, about the small brick house in Elizabeth, about Rufus, about my sister Nora who had known about her, in a general way for 2 years, and would want to meet her at the earliest possible opportunity. We talked about Merrick, about whether one of us needed to change jobs. She said she had already decided. She was going to apply for a position at a competitor firm, not because she didn't like Merrick, because she wanted this, whatever this was, to happen without any workplace ambiguity. She had an offer already. Apparently, she had put out feelers 3 months ago when she realized how she felt about me. I said, "Lila, you put out job feelers 3 months ago because of me?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Lila, that is either the most flattering thing anyone has ever done for me, or the most terrifying." She said, "Both." I said, "Both." Marcus came by, refilled our coffees for the 4th time. Marcus finally said, "You two want food, or are we running a coffee shop?" We ordered 8, kept talking. Around 11:30, she looked at me and said, "Ethan, I have to go. Ren has been texting me every hour. She wants a full report. I said, "Tell Ren the report is good." She said, "I will." We walked out to the parking lot. 2 cars. Hers, mine. It was not raining. The sun was out. Charlotte in April, everything green and slightly humid. I said, "Lila, can I take you to dinner Tuesday night?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Not here. Somewhere different. Somewhere that is not associated with either of our regular lives." She said, "Where?" I said, "There's a small Italian place in Noda called Villani's. Family-owned. 6 tables. You can only get in if you know somebody." She said, "Do you know somebody?" I said, "Yes. My sister used to date the owner's cousin. It's complicated, but yes." She laughed. She said, "Tuesday, Villani's." She reached up, very carefully. She put her hand on the collar of my flannel, just the collar, and she looked at me for a long moment. She did not kiss me. That would have been too fast, and she knew it, and I knew it. But her hand on my collar was a promise. It said, "This is going to happen. Slowly, but it is going to happen." She said, "Thank you for Sunday, Ethan Callaway." I said, "Thank you for Thursday, Lila Ashford." She got in her car, drove away. I stood in the Herald's parking lot for a long time in the April sun. Then I got in my truck and drove home. I want to tell you about the year that followed, because it did not go the way you might expect, and that is why I am telling you this story. Lila took the job at the competitor firm 3 weeks after our first Sunday at Herald's. She gave Merrick a proper 2 weeks. She trained her replacement. Her last day at Merrick, my team threw her a small, quiet farewell in the conference room. She gave everyone a small tin of homemade shortbread with rosemary in it. I was the last person she said goodbye to at the elevator. I said, "Lila, see you tonight?" She said, "See you tonight." She started her new job the following Monday. She was happier there almost immediately. The work was more interesting. The team smaller. She made more money. She stopped eating lunch alone at her desk. We took the first 3 months slow. Dinner twice a week. Movies. Long walks with Rufus. She met Ren's boyfriend, who I liked immediately. She met my sister Nora at a 4th of July barbecue, and Nora took one look at Lila and pulled me into the kitchen and said, "Ethan, do not screw this up." I said, "I don't intend to." Nora said, "Good." The first time she stayed over at my house, the first weekend in July, 3 months after Thursday night in the rain, she brought Rufus a small green rubber toy shaped like a bone. Rufus decided within a week that Lila was his real mother and forgot who I was. Same as every dog in every love story I have ever told. We did not rush anything. That was our agreement. Slow was our word. Slow and quiet and careful. By October, she was staying over most weekends. By December, we were talking about moving in together. By March, 1 year after the rain, we were sitting on the porch of my small brick house on a Sunday afternoon drinking coffee, and Lila said, "Ethan, what if we just got married?" I said, "Lila, that is a very Lila way to propose." She said, "I know." I said, "Yes." She said, "Yes?" I said, "Yes. Obviously, yes. What are we doing this for otherwise?" We got married on a Saturday in June, 14 months after the rain. Small ceremony in Nora's backyard in Asheville. Ren was Lila's maid of honor. Nora was mine, which was a scandal at the courthouse and a joke at the wedding. Rufus wore a bow tie. He ate exactly 1 napkin. At the reception, at the end of the night, Ren stood up and gave a toast. She said, "For 2 years, Lila sat on my couch on Thursday nights and told me about the man at her office. Not because she wanted anything from him, just because she wanted somebody to know she had noticed him. I heard about the flannel he wore to work sometimes on Fridays. I heard about the way he handled the layoff conversations. I heard about the way he stood at the coffee machine in the mornings. I heard about the truck. I heard about the dog. I heard about him for 2 years. And I want to tell you all something. I never once thought she was going to actually meet him. I thought she was going to love him quietly from 10 feet away for the rest of her life. That is the kind of woman she is. Ren looked at Lila. Ren looked at me. Ren said, "The night he showed up at our door, and I saw his face, and I saw the laptop bag in his hand, and I realized this was him. I have never been so happy to be wrong about anybody in my life. Some people wait too long to say what they feel. My sister nearly waited a lifetime. Thank God for the rain. Thank God for the alternator. Thank God for the ride home. Thank God she opened her mouth in the truck. Thank God, thank God, thank God." She raised her glass. She said, "To Ethan and Lila. To the loudest, quiet love story I have ever known." Everybody stood up. Everybody clapped. Lila was crying into her hand. I was crying. More than I had cried in a decade. Rufus took the opportunity to steal a second napkin from an unattended plate. That was our wedding. There is one more thing I need to tell you. Because 2 months after the wedding, 2 months, 1 week, and 3 days after Lila and I got married in Nora's backyard, I was at Lila's old apartment on 7th Street, helping her and Ren move Ren's things out. Ren was moving in with her boyfriend. Lila had already moved into my house. The apartment was almost empty. I was carrying a box of Ren's books down the porch steps when Ren stopped me on the sidewalk. She said, "Ethan, I have to tell you something. And I want to tell you now, before I move out, because the apartment is where it happened, and I want the story to end here properly." I set the box down. I said, "Okay." Ren said, "The night I opened the door and said what I said, I have been thinking about that night for a year and a half. And I have to confess something. When I opened the door and I saw you standing there with Lila's laptop bag, I did not accidentally say what I said. I said it on purpose." I stared at her. I said, "What?" She said, "Ethan, I had been trying to get Lila to say something to you for 2 years. 2 years. I told her every Thursday night. I told her the man was not going to know unless she said it. And she was not going to say it. I knew that. I knew she was going to sit in her cubicle for the next 10 years, watching you from 10 feet away and eating shortbread and dying quietly. That was the trajectory. That was what she was going to do." I was speechless. Ren said, "So when I opened the door and I saw you standing there, I made a decision. In about half a second, I decided that if I said something dramatic and terrible, one of 2 things would happen. Either you would leave and Lila would spend a week in bed and eventually go back to normal, or you would stay and figure it out." She looked at me. She said, "Ethan, I nearly ruined my sister's life on purpose, because I thought there was a chance you would stay. And I am so sorry, and I am also so happy that I was right." I stared at her. Then I laughed. Once. Then I hugged her, standing on the sidewalk in front of the apartment, and she cried into my shoulder for about 30 seconds. I said, "Ren." She said, "Yeah." I said, "You did not nearly ruin her life. You saved it, and you saved mine. And the shortbread was already going to give me away eventually, but you did it in one night." She laughed. She said the shortbread was the plan B. If Thursday hadn't worked, I was going to send you a tin at Christmas with a note. I said, "Ren, please put me in your will. You have earned it." We finished moving her boxes. We locked up the apartment. Lila locked the door for the last time. She held the key in her hand for a moment. She looked at me and Ren standing behind her. She said, "Well, that's that." Ren said, "That's that." I said, "That's that." We walked down the porch steps. Lila took my hand. Ren took Lila's other hand. We walked to the sidewalk. Rufus was waiting in my truck with his head out the passenger window. The apartment on 7th Street sat empty behind us. But the story it had held for 2 years, the story of a quiet woman who cried about a man from 10 feet away, and the roommate who watched her do it, and the rain that finally forced the truth into the open, that story was going to walk with us for the rest of our lives. There is a woman at your office, or in your building, or at your gym, or in your neighborhood, who you have quietly noticed for months. or years. You have not said anything. You have decided you cannot say anything. There are rules. There is your job. There is your history. There is your reasonable adult understanding that quiet people do not just walk up to other quiet people and confess things. But I want to tell you something. Quiet love is love, but quiet love that never gets said is just loneliness with better manners. Somebody has to speak first. Somebody has to open the door. Somebody has to say the thing that nobody in the room can say. Sometimes it will be you. Sometimes it will be their roommate. Either way, when it happens, do not walk away. Stay in the entryway. Make her tea. Sit on the couch. Ask her about Harold's. I promise you it is worth it. I promise you the quiet was killing both of you. If this story reached something in you, if there is somebody in your life you have quietly loved for months or years without ever telling them, hit that subscribe button and tell me their name in the comments below. I read every single one. And every once in a while, one of your stories becomes the next one I tell. Until then, be brave enough to say the quiet thing out loud. You never know who else has been waiting for somebody to say it first.